x. So if you had something like 2 and 1/2, and you were dividing it by 1 1/3, what would you have? 2 1/2 divided by 1 1/3. Well, the first thing we want to do is always convert these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, over 2, like that. And then we'll divide by what we have here. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, and we always write it again over 3. So what we have then is a situation where we have division of fractions. So we have the 5/2 as usual, and we change it to multiplication, and we flip this over to 3/4. And now that we have it into this form, we can multiply. 5 times 3 is 15, 2 times 4 is 8. So we get 15/8. And that is basically the answer, but it's improper. So how many times will 8 go into 15? It can only go one time. Because 8 times 2 is 16, that's too much. So 8 times 1 is 15, or 8 times 1 is 8. The difference between 8 and 15 is going to be 7. And we always write it over 8. So we get 1 7/8. What if you had 3 2/3 divided by 1 1/2? Like that. Well, the same sort of thing would happen. We take the mixed numbers, 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, and we write it over 3, and then we divide by this one. 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3, and we write it over the 2. Now, we change this to multiplication, so we'll have 11/3 times, and we flip this one to 2/3. And then we multiply. 11 times 2 on the top is 22, 3 times 3 is 9. So we have 22 over 9. So again, we think we're done, but then we see, wait a minute, this is an improper fraction. How many times will 9 go into 22? 9 times 2 is 18, so it can go 2 times. The difference between 18 and 22 is a remainder of 4, and we write it over 9. Always over 9. 2 4/9. So you see, the skills that we've learned is really applied over and over again. We just have a slightly more complicated problem where we have two mixed numbers. What if we have 5 1/3 divided by 2 2/3? What do we get there? Well, we say we're going to convert this. So 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16 over the 3, divided by this guy. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8 over this 3. And then here we change this to multiplication. 16 over 3 times, and we flip this one to 3/8. And so then we have 16 times 3 on the top, which if you do 16 times 3, you'll find that that's 48. And 3 times 8 is 24. So we have 48 over 24. And then we see that we can simplify this quite a bit because we can divide the top and the bottom by 4. 48 divided by 4, if you think about it, is 12, because 12 times 4 is 48. And 24 divided by 4 is 6, because 6 times 4 is 24. So if you didn't see it before with 48 over 24, you should definitely see it now. You can do this division directly. 12 divided by 6 is just simply 2. That's the final answer. If you recognized it up here, 48 divided by 24 is also 2. You could have just written the answer straight out. But here we simplified just to show you that if you don't see it at first, eventually you will, and you will get the same correct answer. Okay, so what if we have 4 1/2 divided by 3 2/3? 4 1/2 divided by 3 2/3. So we convert. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, and we write it over 2. This, let's leave it the same for the time being. And here, 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11, and we write it over 3. All right, so now we have division of fractions. We change it to multiplication, 9/2. Change this to multiplication. We flip this over, 3/11. 9 times 3 is, of course, 27. And 2 times 11 is 22. So this is all correct, but it is improper. How many times can 22 go into 27? Well, obviously it can only go one time. The remainder being 27 minus 22, which is 5. And we always write it over the 22, which is the denominator. So 1 5 27ths, that's the final answer. As we work these problems, we're not going to hit a magic problem that suddenly becomes hard. It's just that we're just applying and building our skills over and over, and I'm trying to give you enough problems so that you feel like you're really, really comfortable with it. What if we have 4 4/5 divided by 1 4/5. Well, the first thing we're going to do, as always, is convert the mixed number. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 4 is 24, over 5. The division symbol remains for now. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9, again over 5. So what we need to do next is change this division, 24 over 5, into multiplication and flip this over to 5/9. And now you realize that we have some kind of big problems here, because I don't know how to do 24 times 5 in my head, but I do know that 5 times 9 is 45, so I can put that down there. So what you do is you go off to the side and you say, well, 24 times 5, 5 times 4 is 20, you put a 0, carry the 2, 2 times 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. There's nothing left to do, so it's 120. 120 over 45. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can figure this part out. You realize immediately that 120 and 45 can both be divided by 5. So at the end of the day, 120 divided by 5, you need to figure out what that is. But if you don't know what that is, you can come down here and say 120 divided by 5. You know it's divisible by 5 because there's a 0 at the end. 5 times 2 gives me 10. And when I subtract, I get 2 here. Carry my 0 down. And when I divide 5 into 20, I get 4. 5 times 4 is 20. Remainder is 0, and there's no other digits to carry down. So 5 goes into 120 24 times. So when I simplify this, I get a 24 on the top. And down here, this is much easier. 45 divided by 5 is 9. So again, that's a much smaller improper fraction. We can convert this very easily. How many times will 9 go into 24? Well, 9 times 2 is 18. That's about as close as I can get. The difference between 18 and 24 is 6, and then I still have the 9 on the bottom. So I've done some simplifying, and I've got it down to 2 and 9/6, 2 and 6/9. But I also see that I can divide this by 3 and divide this by 3. So the final answer will be 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 2 2/3. Now, the process that you use to simplify your fraction may be a little bit different than what I'm doing here, and that's okay. All that matters is that you get to this step. See, I chose to divide by 5 here, and then I chose to go to mixed fraction, and then I chose to simplify again. You might have done something different here, because at this point you can actually divide top and bottom by 3 directly, and then you would have a different fraction. But anyway, in the same case, you're going to get down to 2 2/3, and that's all that really matters. So make sure you're building your skills and you're confident enough to know what to do so that you're not questioning it. I have 2 more for you, and we're just going to do them now. What if you have 2 1/6, then you're dividing by 4 1/3. Well, let's change these mixed numbers. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Write it over 6. Leave the division symbol for now. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Leave it over 3 for now. So now I can change to multiplication. 13 over 6, multiply by flipping this over, 3 over 13. All right, so I have 3 and 13 on the top. Multiply 3 times 13. If for some reason you can't multiply 3 times 13 in your head, you just multiply it down here. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 1 is 3. So you get 39 on the top. 6 times 13 is the same thing. 6 times 3 is 18. Put an 8. Carry the 1. 6 times 1 is 6. Plus 1 is 7. So you should get 78 here. So 39 over 78. All right, 39 over 78. Now, you would be very tempted just to circle that. But if you think about it and if you play with it, you'll see that you can divide the top by 39 and the bottom by 39. It's not something that jumps out at you, but if you play with it enough, you'll see that on the top you'll get a 1, 39 divided by 39. On the bottom, this goes 2. 39, if you actually do it, 39 times 2 is actually 78. That's why you have a 2 there. So this whole thing, even though you have all these ugly numbers, it reduces down to 1/2. The answer is 1/2 for that guy. And I'm doing these problems that require a little bit of side math here, because a lot of times that's what happens. You get stuck with a problem, you know how to do it, but because the numbers are large, you have to get practice with it. So let's do one last one. We'll have to do some side math as well. 3 5/9 divided by 9 3/5. So you see you have big numbers out in front, and that's going to cause these issues. 9 times 3 is 27, plus 5 is 32. You get 32 over the 9 here, and you're still dividing by this. 9 times 5 is 45, plus 3 is 48. And on the bottom you have the 5. So you see you have large numbers already. Let's change this to multiplication. 32 over 9 multiplied by, flip this over, 5/48. All right, so that's getting kind of ugly. So what I have to do is multiply 32 times 5. 32 times 5, and I'll do that to the side because I don't know how to do that in my head. 2 times 5 is 10, so I put a 0, carry the 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So what you get on the top is 160, just like that. Now on the bottom, 9 times 48. Again, I don't know what 9 times 48 is. I don't expect you to know what 9 times 48 is. But we need to multiply it. 9 times 8, 72. So we put the 2, carry the 7. 9 times 4 is 36. And 36 plus the 7 is going to give us 43. So you should get 432. Again, you're getting large numbers here. You have to double check your work. So the answer is 160 over 432. Now there's a couple of different ways you can go about this. I know that these are both even numbers because even numbers are always going to end in 0, 2, 4, and there's other numbers also. But you know that if it ends in 0 and 2, they're going to be even. So I know that I can divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. So let's see what happens. 160 divided by 2, I know is going to be 80. I know is going to be 80 because 16 divided by 2 is 8. So I can just put another 0 in there. All right. Now, 432 divided by 2, I'm not really sure what that is. So 432 divided by, I'm going to change this correctly, 432 divided by 2, I'll just have to do it here. 2 times 2 gives me 4, and I subtract that and I get a 0. I'll bring the 3 down. 2 goes into 3 only one time. 1 times 2 is 2. That gives me a 1, and then I'll drag the 2 down. 2 goes into 12 6 times, and then you multiply and you get 12, and you get a remainder of 0, and there's nothing else. So it's 216. So this is 216. All right? So I divide top and bottom by 2, and I get something else, but I notice that what I get here is also divisible by 2. Now, if I were smart, I can probably divide this by a bigger number and do this process faster. But, you know, I'm not noticing that right now. So let me try to divide the top by 2 again and divide the bottom by 2 again. 80 divided by 2, I think you'll all agree, is 40. 216 divided by 2 is going to be 108. And that kind of makes sense because 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 200 divided by 2 is 100. So I get 108 down there. But again, it's almost like over and over again, I notice that I can divide top and bottom by 2 again. 40 divided by 2 is 20, and 108 divided by 2, see, 100 divided by 2 would be 50. So 108 divided by 2 would be 54, because the 8 divided by 2 is going to give you 4. So you get 20 over 54, and yet again, you notice this is still an even number, so I can keep doing this again and again and again. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. 54 divided by 2 is finally going to give me 27, right? 54 divided by 2 is going to give me 27, because you know that 50 divided by 2 is 25. So, and the 4 divided by 2 is going to give you 2. So 25 and 2 give you 27. So you can do that division out. So finally get 10 over 27, and there's nothing else.